Sheba. It's of an apartment building which Israel says was hit by an Iranian missile overnight, in which we now know that 4 people were killed, a couple of dozen injured, it appears, according to Israeli media reporting. And the part of the front of this building has crumpled off. You can see what would have been, I think, balconies by the look of it, have just been destroyed as that missile appears to have slammed into the side of that building. We'll get you more on that situation there. And the Reuters news agency reporting in the past few seconds, quoting Donald Trump on the Israel-Iran conflict, saying the ceasefire is now in effect. Please do not violate it. Donald Trump, of course, announcing that ceasefire late on Monday night. Iranian state television confirming it. No word yet from Israel. We're going to speak now to Nawaf Al-Thani, a former Qatari director of defence intelligence operations and also a former defence attaché to the United States. Welcome back to Newsday. Always good to get your thoughts here on the programme. What is your assessment of the state of play in the Middle East at the moment? If Donald Trump says there is a ceasefire, and given that Israel is a close ally of the United States, do we assume that he is correct?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It looks like the beginnings of a ceasefire has been reached. The news this morning that Qatar helped broker late last night, just after the barrage of ballistic missiles over our heads here in Doha, this potential ceasefire. As you've mentioned in your news broadcast, Israel has yet to comment on that, but it seems like we've got at least the structure of something resembling a ceasefire.
Although we did have Qatar say that they reserved the right to respond to that barrage of Iranian missiles on the Al Udeid US base in its territory. Would you expect Qatar to respond militarily in some form to Iran?
Well, that is obviously unknown. However, the full response that Qatar gave, that they reserved the right to response per international law. So there are many ways to do that. One is definitely through the military, but others are through the international mechanisms. Although I would think that Qatar, having brokered this now potential ceasefire, it's a bit early in the morning here in the Middle East to find out the full details. I presume in the next couple of hours we may have something. That they would support calming down of tensions, especially that the Qatari air defenses were successful in stopping any real damage. I think one ballistic missile found its way through last night. That they may tend to, as they have done in the past, to find a calming way to move forward. But yes, they do reserve the right to respond in the manner and timing of their choosing, as the statement was last night.
Well, Donald Trump did thank Iran for informing him in advance, and that information was clearly passed to Qatar as the airspace was shut. And so, do you think that was this really an attack on Qatar, or was it really just an attack on an American base, albeit in Qatari territory?
Well, I mean, it's if anyone was here in Qatar, it was different. It was very difficult to differentiate between, was this an attack on Qatar or attack on a base on Qatari, land, because I believe both are correct. Now, obviously, the modus operandi of this war in the past 12 days has been, in many instances, to inform the other side of an incoming attack. Unfortunately, that does not guarantee when exactly or how exactly, or if the air defenses are successful or not. We've seen in Israel, for instance, some ballistic missiles slip through. And I think this is a credit to the Qatari Armed Forces and its air defenses in its first ever encounter of this type to be successful in actually defending the homeland.
And when it comes to the wider picture, if, as Donald Trump says, this ceasefire between Iran and Israel is now in effect, do you think it will hold?
Well, that is the hope. Now, that depends on both Israel and Iran. I believe, at least from what I've seen, that the Israelis have now found their off-ramp, as they say, towards a ceasefire. Now, politically within Israel, with that center and off-ramp hold, that is difficult to say. In the past, in similar circumstances, the Israelis have managed to move beyond that off-ramp, citing national security. And I think that is something we have to wait and see. Now, obviously, the Israeli government being so silent hours after the announcement is not the best and optimal way to deal with the ceasefire. But we don't want to jump the gun, as the Americans say, and there is still a way forward towards calming the region.
And what is the role that Qatar is playing? And I wonder whether you think it has a role when it comes to negotiating about the future of Iran's nuclear program, because Israel and the US are pretty clear there just can't be one.
Well, Qatar's interest in its own national security is regional stabilization, and that coincides with Israel's goals and Iran's goals of having security in their own hemisphere, in their own spheres of influence. However, I think the Iranians have mentioned in their well, until the 12 days ago, their negotiations with the United States, that they were interested in ending their militarized nuclear program. Now, that obviously is off the table. We have to start from scratch. But I think there is that opportunity, since it did manifest in the past, that it could once again be resurrected. And I think Qatar playing a role this time in the ceasefire could play a bigger role in the future. But again, it's very early hours and early days to actually make sure that that happens. We need to make sure that the ceasefire holds. It's barely been a few hours, but I think that could happen.
And does Qatar need to pick a side? Because it has provided political and financial support for Hamas, which Israel has been attempting to destroy in Gaza. It clearly does have ties to what to the Ring of Fire, as Iran has called it. It's a host of proxies across the region. And now you have the US and Israel attempting quite strongly to ensure that those proxies are no longer, and indeed Iran itself is no longer able to harm Israel. Do you think Qatar needs to choose?
I don't think Qatar really did choose in the past, and therefore it shouldn't now.
It hosted Hamas.
In fact,
surely that's a choice.
well, I mean, when you help an ally and acquiesce to the ally's request to host Hamas, so negotiations could happen. Surely that's not taking a side, and if it is taking a side, it is confusing which side it took, because it did acquiesce to an American and Israeli request by hosting Hamas, not a Hamas request or an Iranian one. I mean, we can't rewrite history. I mean, these are actual facts. So I think, and that is also a dangerous precedent. If the US asked the UK, for instance, to help in a situation, should the UK think twice before it supports an ally, because it may be misunderstood in the future? No, I think the Qataris have been clear. Taking a side towards international law and stability is not taking sides. If anything, it's taking sides towards sanity and peace. And I think Qatar will